Hi, I'd like to invite you into Tom Phillips' home and studio. You're welcome. Come on in. Here we have Tom Phillips himself. It's a self-portrait painted in his middle years. He's surrounded by a lot of green growth, the cool, the blue, the air, somewhat a little bit like the blue period. But look at the intensity of his eyes, looking through his glasses directly at us, reddish ears, red pens in his pocket, and the red striking brush pointing right at us. That's a passionate painter, waking up in his growth in a cool environment. And he's addressing us directly. It's a very intense painting. He kept this in his living room, just as we see it here. He blocks his window. He's looking at himself. Everything's a self-portrait. I'd like to draw your attention to this work here. It's a cutout, paper cutout, not unlike Chinese paper cutouts. It's really the same thing. This is an image made by Warren Luckock. Warren Luckock was a very close friend of Tom Phillips, as I was. Luckock was born in 1915, Tom Phillips 1931. I was born in 1955. The three of us met a long time ago. And it was like 3 generations working together. He was my teacher. He was Tom's teacher. But later, Warren Luckock said, I cannot be around Tom so much and his work because his influence is too strong on me. Very interesting observation. This may be a self-portrait of Warren Luckock himself. We're still debating, is it Warren or is it Warren representing someone else? I see Warren in this one. You can see Warren Luckock, WL, cut out there. Here we have a Tom Phillips portrait right beside it. And the sitter's unknown, but deeply feeling. And Tom had a great ability in painting hands and feet. He was interested in anatomy to no end, but he always wanted to show the emotional side of a human being, not just the physical. Hence the distortions. Distortions which are appropriate to emotion and thought and feeling, but maybe not proportionate in terms of a photographic likeness. Tom was a photographer. Painting was paramount to him, to make changes, to express something internal, inside. Here we have a work by Tom Phillips, wood carving. Clearly a nude figure, male, reaching for a moon, a crescent moon. But it's not the new moon. It's the latter part, early in the night. And it's the male figure reaching for the feminine, for the heavens, for the sky. You'll see that in Tom's work quite a lot, where he's reaching for something that's cosmic and very earthly. And it's well conceived all around. Tom came to sculpture later in his life. It's a result of his love of volume and form, which is evident in his drawings, prints, and paintings. We're in Tom's living room right now. We have a sculpture over here called Erda, the reclining figure, Mother Earth. And this was not Tom's bed, but his assistant's bed when he was older. And there is a very early Tom Phillips there. Not very typical of his later work, in a way that's very different than what happened later. I see some earlier carvings here, again, merged with your paintings, quite clever. Your jewelry, Tom in shorts, standing in front of the house. I would assume that's 1960s. Hey Tom, lots of memories. Artist 25, room 30, studio 303. We shared a number of studios together. Here we are in the former dining room of Tom Phillips. And the house was built by his father and what's next door, the semi-attached. And at a later date, Phillips's father actually built an extension. You can see it right here on the floor. There's the original floor, and here's the addition running this way. And what's important about this is it gave more room for family downstairs, and it gave more private space for Tom upstairs. His principal studio is right above us. We'll take a look at that in a few moments. Thank you. Welcome to Tom's kitchen. This kitchen, if you just take a look around, it's built in 1931. I believe this is the original kitchen. But that's not the most interesting thing about a Toronto house having an original kitchen from 1931. What's really interesting for me is that this very table is the table Tom was born on in this room. And someone had decided to put it out in the garbage because the leg broke off. I brought it back in. It's important. Here's the leg. I'll fix it soon. Tom decorated his kitchen with sculptures and paintings as well. Art is everywhere. Teapot, brushes in a vase, and again, stereo, music everywhere. Classical music was paramount for Tom. He blasted it, played it all the time. Highly knowledgeable about symphonies, operas. He sang himself, in fact, and played some instruments. Here we are in Tom Phillips's basement. This basement is a typical Toronto basement, 1931. Not many things changed here. Furnace, of course, update, that kind of thing. Yes, we have a dryer and a washer that are modern, but Tom likes these surfaces to stack more artwork. You can see it all over. It's also a principal place for him to store his large carvings, so they're not in the way of the active studio upstairs. Some of them were carved here, but many of them were carved actually at a near location called Mimico School of the Arts. I'd like you to come this way. Of a female figure. His works tends to dominate with male figures. I think because he was partly able to give more ruggedness to the male figure rather than imposing it onto the female figure. Very sensuous figure. And how does he place the female figure? A church behind. Is that a question? Is that about beginnings, origins? She's sitting on great big leaves. Fertile, rich, plant-like, of the earth, Mother Earth, and the blossom pointing right at her. Fruitfulness, bearing children, humanity, the continuum. Look at the overhanging cloud above her head. He makes it three-dimensional. Clouds are not just at a distance. They're also above us and behind us and around us. Quite marvelous as a sculpture. We see a backside of a male figure, also an artist actually, with a landscape. And you can see a cutout in the lower right. That's for this piece right here. It's an insert. It's meant to go in there. It's been separated just for the moment. And it's a self-portrait of Tom Phillips at work. You can see him holding the brush. He's in front of his panel on the easel, his palette down below with a container for solvent or oil, solvent in this case, and holding another two brushes with his opposite hand. Over here, we have an old rack still storing some of the original works that were exhibited in the 50s and 60s, still in the original frames. They haven't been seen since then. Welcome! Here in Tom's recesses of the basement right now, we have a cabinet here that's storing actually magazines that influenced him since he was a child. These are from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and magazines like this, Amazon and other ones. He loved fantastical figures and fantasy, which enters his own world of reality. And so this is a storehouse for those. He kept everything. Tom was compulsive about keeping everything, which makes it wonderful in the study of Tom Phillips, his life and his work. This is the original storage room of Tom Phillips's paperworks. And he used very fine paper that doesn't fade or go dark. but there are some sheets that could, and so we store them, or he stored them, in this absolute darkness. We have the curtains open at the moment. And this room was filled. We've moved, actually, works from here into the front room to sort and catalog his work. So it actually was filled to the ceiling pretty much, and you couldn't even walk in as far as I am right now. And in this cabinet down here, this antique piece, we have drawers filled with slides, reference for his work, and expressive works onto their own. This works that he decided not to do as paper works, in other words, printed himself, black and white. These are in color. Here we are in Tom's bedroom, his main studio. We can see his bed right in front of the camera right now. That's from the 1800s, a rope bed, landscape. We have very large pieces up here, monumental size of the various stages of life. And we have some very large principal works here right now in the upper studio, and revolving around his evolution and his way of relating to people and society as an artist and as a human being. And he identifies with the suffering of Christ, and we have a lovely portrait of a young woman. The bondage, or bound up Jesus, and portraits, and stacks of many, many other things. We have cabinets to our left here. I'm not sure whether our camera can catch that right now, filled with photographs that Tom took. As I mentioned, he had a dark room and developed his own photographs. He was equally a photographic artist as well. Another self-portrait by Tom Phillips, 1967. Quite early, intense. He's looking directly at us. He's questioning himself and us. An industrial scene in oil on panel, many oils. We're just showing you a very few. So he goes from industrial to wilderness. Nomad. And then his humanity of his figures. Another example of Tom Phillips's self-portraits in oil. Powerful, direct, vivid in color. And here in contrast we have Georgian Bay, pen and ink. The watercolor, very delicate, very gentle. Not a usual portrayal of Georgian Bay, like Stormy Bay by the group of 7. I hope you enjoyed this brief visit into Tom's life and his work. It's just a kind of a taste of what he's about. Tom did exhibit most recently when he was in Paris and France. And also this is coupled with his most recent success in China and in France, and also museum exhibitions in China itself, and did very well. And but for many, many decades he kept his work to himself, sharing only with his friends. So this is a rare opportunity to take a peek into his life and work, and every time I revisited, I learned something new. Tom, for the greater part, was not interested in showing his work. He was interested in producing work. More importantly said, in living. And when he put marks down on a paper or canvas or carved his wood, he put his living into that work. So it's a living legacy of his love, his joy, his increasing knowledge and appreciation for all that is alive. This is just the beginning of bringing out Tom's legacy of his life by way of his artwork, which is terribly varied, wonderfully varied. He was a local painter, but he was also an international painter. Firstly, because he did venture to other countries to paint, Belgium, Holland, France, and other places. And he explored greater parts of Canada from east to west. But he is by and large known regionally here as a local painter of Toronto scenes. And over the many, many years, he has witnessed the changing of Toronto, which means meeting place. And that in itself, historically, is rather interesting and important as he's documented it. Our aim is to bring his work now out into the public by way of this film and exhibitions and writings. He's a very unique man, very unique artist, very Canadian, but also very universal, in that he loves this earth and people, regardless of their shape and color. In fact, he loves the shape and color of various things. His whole life has been an exploration of that, and he's trying to find that tie between all things. That's what makes it wonderful. Goodbye, Tom.